This computer. Cool. So we're live now. So so like I said, today we're going to be covering sort of doubles tactics when we're in this sort of situation where we're sort of both at the base. The server's at the baseline, the returners at the baseline. You've got the two net players in sort of conventional sort of positions. So in this situation, we sort of talked about sort of tactics before. So in terms of, sort of where we are in the point. So what we're sort of looking at is kind of where it's equal at the moment, and then what we want to be doing in these sort of situations. So what we've got is our sort of standard sort of plays to start with. So coming back to our sort of like our lessons on tactics, we had like sort of consistency, use our strength, exploit weakness, control time, and control space. For doubles, it's a lot of it is around sort of consistency. And then like around consistency, like the quality of our consistency, that's going to make a difference when we're playing. Quite a lot of the times it's through sometimes sort of boredom or slash sort of the feel the need to do more. We sometimes will try sort of other things when it's not necessarily the right time to do it, and we're putting ourselves at sort of much bigger risk when we're sort of doing it. So to start with, sort of what we're looking to do when we're in that sort of position is through consistency, which is essentially ball pressure, is sort of build it up. So with in the sort of the diagonal sort of situation, what we're trying to make sure that we do is our shot is good enough that it's going to sort of be far away from the net player. So how I sort of like visualize this when I'm sort of playing. So we've got sort of like two parts. We've got like the sort of stationary sort of net player that we play against, and our sort of more mobile net player that we play against. And this is sort of part of my sort of thinking and how I'm playing my shot. If I'm playing the sort of more stationary net player who doesn't want to go for too much, essentially, if you imagine them with their racket out, like that's as much as going to be tempting them. And then what you sort of imagine is almost sort of like a visual space that can then sort of cover the sort of the spaces either side. From the outside tram line, sort of past the racket. So that's kind of your target that you're sort of looking for to keep away from the net player. If you're playing that sort of more mobile player, the one that's sort of is going to cover a bit more space, we talk about it as the net. We want to be able to cover a step and a reach. So in your head, it's almost like you're visualizing where the end of the racket would be, and that's almost like your sort of target zone that you're sort of playing with. So away from the edge of the racket, up to this sort of outside tram line. That's the sort of space. And then like the third one you've got to be sort of wary of is then that net player is willing to sort of move a lot more. So one is you've got to step and a reach, and you've got to give it a little bit more. And the second thing is like the quality of the shot needs to be that little bit better, just to sort of not tempt them when they're sort of around the net. Coming back to like the first sort of one, the person sort of not moving, or the person who just does the step and a reach, then it's how are we going to be effective with that shot to put enough pressure on our opponent without taking risk. So if you sort of imagine like the court, and like I've done it with our sort of doubles drills before, is almost just put down like what we call like big target, small target that we're sort of looking for. So the idea of like the small target, if you had the baseline, it's around like the 3/4 length on the court. So sort of halfway between the service line baseline, and it's probably like a racket distance or a racket head distance in the singles court from the inside tram line. That's our small target that we're sort of playing with our sort of standard shot. And then obviously like the big target being sort of locked sort of further around it, because the reality is we're not going to hit a small spot every time, but if we know that's where we're going, then it's going to be sort of give us sort of a bit of range that comes around it, and it's still going to be good enough. I mean, as we know, if we hit it like on the baseline or sort of, a foot inside the baseline, it is a better shot. But if we're aiming there on our rally shot and our margin of error is a little bit sort of too big, we're going to make some mistakes. If we're aiming halfway between the service line and baseline and we just hit it a little bit too well, it then just inadvertently becomes a better shot, but it's still going to be within the margins for error as it's sort of coming in. In terms of sort of speed that we're looking to sort of reproduce each time is like a 7 out of 10. That's our sort of rally speed. That's relative to obviously each and every one of us here. So my 7 out of 10 is going to be different to Rupert's 7 out of 10, to Brian's 7 out of 10. But what we're looking to is obviously be consistent into that sort of area with our 7 out of 10. And what allows us to be that bit more consistent as well is if we can sort of creating that sort of top spin on the ball, which is going to allow us just to sort of have a little bit more net coverage. But obviously the spin's going to bring it back down into the court, which is going to make it a little bit sort of safer too. So that's kind of our like sort of bread and butter. And essentially you could play doubles like this, going for that tactic and do nothing else. It's almost like from the baseline, doubles 101, because what you're doing is you're not giving the net player a chance because it's out of their range, depending on who you're playing in terms of your target and how you're sort of trying to hit it. And two, you're not giving too many chances. If you get aiming for the 3/4 length and it's around that sort of area and it's a 7 out of 10, you're not giving them easy chances to attack. So essentially then that's where it goes to the other person. Like I said before, we start making poor decisions. They'll try and create an angle, try and hit it sort of into the space between the two of you, or try and go up the line when the shot's not necessarily there. And you've probably sort of seen it in some sort of team sort of matches. Sometimes you see like these longer rallies where it just goes and goes because like they know the risk of trying something else. So like that's why you often see some doubles matches and like some points can seem to go on for a very long time, because it is obviously like doubles 101 in terms of what to do from the baseline. For yourself, Roops, it's like in terms of that, obviously the 101 to start with. Is there anything you want to add to that or build on that?
Yeah, no, I'll try, and then we'll see what my connection's like. I think everything you spoke about is what we sort of spoke about earlier. I think it's trying not to get into the trap of trying to out-hit the other player at the baseline, and understanding that your job at the baseline is to try and facilitate a volley opportunity for your partner at the net rather than try and win the point from the back. For 99% of the time, there is that sort of the occasion where we can go down the line, which we've spoken about a little bit, but the main thing you're there to do is not make the first mistake. Your partner at the net is there to try and finish the rally. So as long as you understand that and try and play with that mindset, that's really what we want you to try and, the main thing we want you to try and take away from today. Because too often when you see sort of doubles, any sort of club doubles, is we see a lot of mistakes at the baseline. And I feel that's where the player at the back is trying to, maybe they feel it's their job to do too much. They feel like they need to win more points. When in reality, like Ben said, although it might be seen as a bit boring, you might get a bit, it's a bit tedious. Actually getting that ball back, getting it back deep, and getting it back away from the net player consistently is eventually going to grind the other player down, and hopefully set your partner up for a volley before the opponent's partner gets a chance to volley. And I think just moving on to sort of the next point of how we can do that, how we can apply that pressure, but in a consistent way. I think people typically try and hit through the ball too much, add too much power and hit too low over the net. And again, that's where the mistakes come from. And I'm sure all of you will agree, although we spoke about dealing with fast balls last week and they're not easy to deal with. I'm not saying they are, but actually dealing with a ball that's quite fast, as long as it comes through a nice height, actually is quite easy to deal with, when you compare that to a much higher ball that's pushing you back, and changing, like we spoke about last week, breaking your contact point into a higher contact point. So actually by just hitting a little bit higher over the net, maybe a bit more topspin, it won't look as dramatic. It might not look as dramatic, but actually that ball is going to be a more consistent rally ball cross-court in doubles, but also it's going to actually be more effective because it's a much harder ball for the other player to deal with. And there's a much higher chance then that your partner will get a chance to intercept. So it's just really understanding what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do that, really. Ben?
Yeah, so we're done, guys. That's tennis 101 for doubles. So obviously that's kind of our sort of bread and butter tactic. That's what you're going to do. And I said, if you do that effectively, you're going to be tough to beat. So it's as simple as that. If you can do that sort of effectively and repeat. And then that, especially with the ball coming to, and then what we're going to sort of look at next is when to do something, and most importantly, why. So we've got our main tactic, but then when other sort of variables sort of happen, we're like, what are the options? Why are we doing it? Because if we understand sort of tactics in terms of why we're doing it, and we're making the right choices at the right time, we're playing smarter tennis. Whereas sometimes I could try a drop shot or a lob off any shot. I mean, tennis is an open sport. There's no rules that say you have to do something. You can do what you like. I mean, there's very poor decisions, and there's obviously better decisions, but we can do what we like when we're sort of doing it. So a couple like sort of three ones that we're going to sort of look at is breaking from tennis 101, that sort of cross court sort of solid shot. So we've got going up the line, when do we do it and why? We got the lob, when do we do it and why? And we got that sort of creating that more angled shot as well, so from our opponent trying to drag the other person off the court. So when do we do it and why? So we'll open it up for you guys. Actually, we'll do it a little bit differently today. So I want to hit more of an angled shot. So if that's where, think of it like I'm trying to hit the shot which is going to break the outside tram line. So it goes in and it's going over the outside tram line before it goes past where the baseline theoretically would carry on. What ball would I be receiving, or what situation would be happening that it would be a smarter choice to be trying that? So it could be like school, where I'm going to pick on someone in a second, or we're going to see if someone comes forwards and answers the question.
Okay, I'll go first then.
Thank you, Brian.
So you'd probably try to do it with a ball that was coming wider to you. So if you were on the forehand court, you'd be pushing you out to the right if you're assuming you're a right-handed player.
Yeah.
Conversely, if it was on the backhand. So it would not be a good idea if it was coming down the middle of the court.
Yeah, so first one is that ball in, especially where it is. Like a phrase we use a lot is like, you need a bit of an angle to create an angle. Like if it's too central, you're taking like a bit more risk, whereby when you've got that angle, you can really take it off the court as it's coming in. Again, like depending on like sort of skill level and things like that, like if you're under a bit more pressure and you're wide, yes, more angle is available to you. But if your skill level is going to not allow you to make that shot consistently, it's then almost back to 101 tennis, back to the safer area. If we're, an easy one is where we got that width, but like a slightly slower, shorter ball, then it's going to be easier for us to create the shot. So getting that angle, dragging them off the court. So that's our sort of first why, is the ball in that we're receiving, that bit of width is going to allow us to go cross court. So that's what we're doing. And then the effect is obviously what we're like after, is you're looking to drag our opponent so they're sort of stretching a little bit more outside of their standard sort of hitting zone, which is in tennis, obviously that's where we're going to play our best shots. When we're moving, it's going to be harder, which will then hopefully create some opportunities for our net player or for us for an easier shot. So yeah, Brian, well done. Kicked us off with a good solid answer first. Can anyone think of any other reasons why we would try and create more of an angle that's not related to the ball coming towards us? Go on, Bill. I can see you got something at the tip of your tongue there.
Position of the other players, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly that. So sometimes you'll find that the baseliner who you're playing against doesn't recover to a correct doubles position. So from the baseline, you usually want to be around, obviously it varies a little bit depending on the dynamics of the point, but they should be around outside foot, inside tram line. What you sometimes sort of find in doubles is people shift too much into the center of the court, which then leaves the opportunity. So to actually take on the shot, yes, the risk is the same to try and create a little bit more of an angle dragging off the court, but the reward is much higher because they're out of position, so they're going to struggle a lot more with it. So if we recognize our opponents in the wrong place, then that's the time that we can then try and take advantage of it. What I would say is, like with Brian's point before about, obviously if it's right down the center and they're out of position, you're not going to create the same advantage with it. But if you've got your standard ball in around that area that we were sort of talking about before, then trying to break it off and move them out of position is a great time to sort of do it. So it's the ball in to us, so it's the right ball. and where they are. And if you've got both together, the likelihood is that it's going to be close to a winner if you execute it well. Because the wider ball is going to allow you to create a wider shot, one, and then being out of position, they're just further away from where it's coming. So recognizing those sort of ones, that's obviously understanding like the wide, and the effect will sort of come from it. Roots, is there anything you want to add around sort of creating the angle?
So I think the answers we got there were bang on as to the reasons why. Just one thing quickly, just in case you guys think we might have sort of contradicted what we said a few weeks ago, because I know when we were speaking about the serve, and we were saying in doubles try and target most of your serves down the centre of the court, not to create the angles. Just remember, we're talking about here a chance where you can probably try and finish the rally with that shot, or like Ben said, it's important that you're at least making the other player hit it on the run. Obviously, what we don't want to do is have a wide ball ourselves and then sort of just pat it back, creating an angle, because that is then where we're going to be susceptible to being passed either side of one of us or down the middle of the two players. Does that make sense? Obviously, if you're just pushing it out wide but slowly, or maybe a bit too high and a bit too soft, you're then creating a chance for them to finish the point. So as long as you keep it, with enough pace and not too high, and enough pace out wide, then like Ben said, the main thing we're looking for is to try and at least make them hit on the run or hit slightly off balance. What we don't want is you to go cross court again and that player has time to get there, set their feet up, stop the feet, and then rip it past you, and then you come blaming us.
Yeah, just to sort of like build on that, like one of the things I use a lot when I'm sort of coaching and sort of seeing is it's kind of like what I call like the tennis loop. So there's like the 4 stages that happens, and obviously it's a repeating cycle as we're sort of playing tennis. So the first stage is perception, so reading the ball in, 1. That's so in Brian's case, we're reading the ball, we're seeing it going wider. And so perception will also, in doubles, will incorporate where the other people are on the court. 2 is then make the decision. So we've recognised it, we've made the decision. That's why we're talking about the options and why. 3rd stage is then the execution, which Rupert was just like elaborating on there. Obviously, we know what we're trying to do, and then we know what the effect is that we're trying to create on our opponent. If we, like I said, if we go too slowly cross court with an angle and they're there able to play a better shot, it was the right time to do it. Just the execution wasn't good enough. And like the last bit with the execution, then the last stage of the tennis loop is the awareness. So it's like if we're clear on what we're trying to do, then we're trying to execute it. Because we're clear what we're trying to do, we also know we should then be aware of how well we achieved it. So you can, as you're playing, you can almost sort of fine tune yourself a little bit in terms of, I'm trying this, that was a bit too slow that time. So next time the opportunity comes, to give it a little bit more on the ball, which will then hopefully then make it a bit more effective, and then you're aware that your opponent's struggling and you're getting what you're after. But yes, it's a good sort of system to sort of work through and sort of learn as you sort of develop your skills and your awareness when you're playing in terms of the tactics. That would be the angle. The second one we're sort of going to cover is when to go up the line. So we've had answers from Brian and Jill so far. So Mark, you're in the hot seat. When would you go up the line?
He's going to play the mute card.
Look.
It's only you have to talk in English, isn't it?
Unmute.
Still muted.
I'll unmute. I've done it for you, Mark, hopefully, unless we bounced it backwards and forwards.
There you go. That's better. Sorry. That was my excuse. I was on mute.
Yeah,
like that.
Exactly. That was what my daughter uses when she's asked questions at school. Well, it's probably when you've got something onto the forehand and it's coming across, most probably on an angle as well, and the opponent at the net is out of position, or if they're out of position, you do it anyway if he's out of position. But it's if they are not in the correct position, sort of to cover the tram line.
he hit a few of the points there. Very good.
So you've just accumulated everything. You've got all the points.
All right. Okay.
100% for Mark there. Very good.
Very good answer.
I thought at some stage during these things you said something about doing it down the line on a high ball? Is that?
We had, in terms of like decisions, so like I think we talked about when we got that sort of sitting up ball, if we come forwards taking it early, we can then sort of look to sort of use them in some other sort of circumstances.
Right. Okay.
And essentially, Mark's hit like the main ones, and then obviously we're going to sort of just sort of elaborate a little bit around that. But
Jill, just on that quickly, sorry, if you just flip that on its head, because what we were speaking about is the main thing is that we wouldn't try and go down the line if the ball was quite low, particularly low.
Ah.
Yeah,
Right.
just because
I see.
the net's at
Yes.
its high point.
I see. Right. Okay.
And
Yeah.
also, obviously, a straight line is a shorter distance than going cross court, which is
I
diagonal.
see. Right.
And it's a harder shot. So, and you've got a net player to get it past. So, if the ball is low, obviously you've got to lift it to get it up.
Yeah.
And put it
Yeah.
back down.
Yeah.
You need to put more spin on to do that, which slows it
Okay.
down, which therefore
Okay.
means the net player has a better chance of getting it.
Yeah.
With a
Yeah.
high ball, it just means, as we'll speak about now, you can actually hit it a bit flatter. So,
Yeah.
be
Right.
more
Okay.
aggressive and
Yeah.
still get it. That's the only thing to remember. So,
Right.
that doesn't mean on a high ball you have to go down the line by any means. It's more the opposite. It's more if it's low, we would try.
You don't.
Exactly that.
Yeah. Okay.
I think for me, like the biggest main one about up the line is all to do with the net player, though. The net player you are facing, that's the biggest sort of thing. Like you could have the perfect ball to go up the line, how we sort of describe it, how it's on our forehand tick, it's our strength, we've got a bit of width tick, we can do it. But if your opponent is standing pretty much in the tram lines, there's no benefit of going up the line whatsoever. So having the opponent is like a big factor with it. So if you're playing someone who's just always shifts the tram lines, like they're almost covering the tram lines like this. So it's the only way you're going to beat them is by almost just beating them with sheer speed going towards the line. But when they're that far across, the option is then you can go a lot more central on the court, which we talked about the other week, which closes the angle, creates the advantage. So first thing, the opponent. So we'll sort of then you sort of like try and sort of spot, because we've talked about positions at the net before, like you've got our neutral position. Now, sometimes people won't understand about shifting left and right at the net. So they're set up to start with for when it kind of goes into that tennis 101 area. But when it does go wider, if they haven't moved across, the actual space that you can see just gets bigger and bigger. So that's what we're sort of like you're looking for first, is like the opportunities created from our opponents. So the awareness of what's sort of happening. If they are in like kind of like the standard positions as they want to be, you would rarely look to go up the line if you are kind of pushed central yourself, because effectively, like if rather than sort of going round them as it's sort of coming in, it's going past them. So they'll actually be naturally covering more of the court when they're in that position. Obviously, then if they move too much into the middle, then there's more space to go into. Actually,
Is it also, if they're quite close, the opponent is quite close to the net, is that sort of when you would try and go down the line? Because
so in this sort of circumstance, so if they were, let's say they're in the correct position, which does mean that they are a step and a reach from the outside tram line in relation to where I'm sort of playing it. If they are quite close to the net, I wouldn't necessarily go for it when I'm sort of more in rally mode. But if I'm moved up the court, I'm taking it early, taking time away, and I can hit a strong shot up the line, and they're quite close, then I know that the reaction time's not going to be there. So I think normally we talk about the net player, like if I'm so if Rupert's hit a short ball to me, I'm coming forwards to attack. Rupert should
I'm running at that point.
He'll get out of there. They should back up, which gives them that more time to sort of do it. So again, like left and right is a factor, but like forwards and backwards, if they're in the wrong place, it creates an opportunity. So when we're making decisions, it's like I tried that because of this reason, and it's it's knowing the reasons why you're doing it rather than fancy hitting up the line. I haven't done it for a while.
I think what Ben said about the position of the net player is so important, because obviously, if the player is standing pretty much in the tram lines, like we said, there's a gap. There's such a large proportion of the court that you can get the ball into by going cross court. You know, and you're not going to make a mistake doing that, and the net player has no chance of getting it. So unless you're playing some unbelievable player at the back of the court who just hits winners on every forehand, which doesn't happen, then you're better off just playing cross court, playing it safe, boring.
Because if you fail at trying to get it down the line and you just don't get the accuracy because it's a smaller area to get in, and they get that shot, they volley it, they've got quite a lot to get that shot in, and you know, sort of, it's that they can get a winner quite easy. So it's a sort of, almost, if you don't get it, you're sort of, it's a bit of a risk.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, exactly that, Mark, and it's a calculated risk at the right time. But when there's no need to take that risk, don't take that risk. I mean, I'm laughing inside because the amount of times I've taken that risk knowing that I shouldn't take that risk. But this is why when you watch Ben and I play doubles, you should really watch Ben. There's a lot of bad practice in my
I follow a textbook. Rupert follows his heart when he plays.
I'm trying to keep the passion for the sport for as many years as I can, and I think it's the only way. No, but just on that as well, the other thing, when Ben was saying, obviously, if you're more central in the court and you try and go down the line, if you remember the week where we spoke about where the ball was passing the net, it's all about that again. So if you're in the centre of the court or nearer to the centre, trying to hit down the line, your ball is actually, the shot is actually going to cross the net, probably just, you know, about halfway between the centre of the net and the net post, isn't it? It's going to cross the net pretty much right in front of where that player is. So even if they're in a really central position, it's still going to be a really easy volley. But I think, Mark, you touched on it with your initial bombshell, fantastic answer. You said you can almost go round them. If the ball's out wide, obviously that ball is crossing the net a lot wider, you know, to the point Ben and I played at doubles a few years ago and he actually hit a shot around the net post. He's smiling because he knows I was going to bring it up. It was like watching Federer, I must say. It was almost as good as the shot I hit the point prior. But you know, he actually hit the ball round the net post and into the court. So that shows, obviously, when you're pushed that wide, obviously going down the line, there are suddenly these angles that just aren't available normally. So it just depends on like where the player is at net, but also where you are. And I think like everything we teach, and it's every situation is different. You know, the player is always in a slightly different position. The ball you're receiving is in a slightly different position. They might move at a slightly different time. It's just about focusing on those main things. So focusing where the player is. You know, is it a suitable ball to do this? And also, do I need to take this risk? You know, and if you feel like it's a bit risky and there is, just go cross court. Really, we're saving this for those times when this is actually a really viable option. You know, it makes sense sort of tactically to do this. So.
If we think of it in like attack, rally, defence, you would never rally up the line. You wouldn't defend up the line. You only attack up the line. So it's again like, what ball are we receiving? Where's the opponent? And then that's our sort of option. The sort of one sort of caveat I put round, which is not to do with like the ball towards us and where your opponent is as you're hitting the ball, is if you are playing a net player that is very, very active, like gambles across a lot of the time, sticking a few balls up the line makes them think, and they know that you're willing to do it. And then what that does is it puts a seed of doubt in their head, or they don't feel as confident just to roam into the middle of the court because they know that you can do it. Even if you miss it, that's enough for them to know that you're going to try it sometimes. And what that does is then hopefully stops them moving as much. But again, that's also like going up the line, and why. That is the why to that one. It is to do with the opponent and the psychology of them moving around, and it's trying to get them back in their space, which allows you to go cross court a lot more sort of safely without them having to intercepting, and you feeling that you have to shift further and further across with your shots causing errors.
It's definitely worth putting at least one of those in early on in a set. Sometimes on the return of serve is a good one because also it puts the net player, you know, it reminds them that if they keep serving out wide, you're capable of getting to that ball and actually placing it, you know, down. Even if the volleyer volleys it back, you're capable of hitting that shot and timing it down the line. It keeps like Ben said, it keeps the net player in position, but also it just puts the server on edge a little bit. So yeah, as long as you can justify that to yourself, again, I've done that for the reason of, that sort of psychological, tactical reason, then that's fine. But if you start just doing it sort of willy-nilly every other point, then that's where you need to sort of just step back and look at it and go, actually, I should probably be going cross court more. But yeah.
I mean, one thing like I use with that sort of that sort of psychological sort of edge to it a little bit was if someone served, if I was on the forehand side and they served it just out long or wide, I would just sort of control the ball into the tram lines up the line. So even though the point's dead, what that's doing is I'm just sort of demonstrating to my opponent that, yes, I can do this. So like it's just making them think. Just even like, so there's small advantages you can gain. You're not like smacking it up the line. You're just sort of demonstrating that you can hit that shot. But yes, does anyone have any questions around sort of the up the line? So we sort of covered a few different parts of that, and it's just like, again, it's understanding the why, isn't it? Cool.
They got it as soon as Mark gave his answer 10 minutes ago. We didn't need to chime in.
We had to pad it out a little bit after Mark's great answer.
Very good.
Pretend there was more than there was.
Mr. Mottram, 3 people have answered. We are now going to the lob. When and why would we lob the net player?
If you have a person who's standing very close to the net, giving you some space behind. Why? If you've got a slower ball, perhaps, where you can control the top spin, drop it over the top of them. And even if the ball comes back from the player at the base line, you've moved them across to the other side. So you then may have created some extra space for the next point, for the next exchange.
Yep. Yeah, so you sort of covered like a few of the sort of ones there. So again, like you can see how like the positions of our opponents does have a big effect on our decision making, because it shifts the scale of risk reward. So if your net player opposite you is right on top of the net, it's going to be a lot easier to get it over their heads each time without them sort of intercepting or getting a smash on the shot. So like one would be that. So like we can just use it, and then what that does is they have to then move back, or if they stay really close, it's just an easy tactic to keep repeating, isn't it? But when they do move back, it then makes it easier to go cross court, because when they're close to the net, they're going to be able to get more of your shots. So one would be that. You said about the ball in, Andy. What type of ball in is easiest to hit a lob off?
Well, for me personally, I actually find the lower balls, I can get down and up over the top of it a bit better, but that may just be me.
Could be just you, Andy. Could be.
It is by the sound of it.
Well, if I hit imagine if I hit a low slice ball to you that's skidded low. Not there.
No, not a slice. No,
not slice. So it's sometimes easy, like when there's actually like a little bit more flight to it. So like it might be that you're hitting it low, but it's dropping down low. It's not coming in and staying low. Because when you've got like the ball with a little bit more arc on it, it's easier to, as it's dropping down, it's easier for us to meet it with that sort of similar lift to actually get the ball up and down. So in terms of like the easiest one to sort of get that type of lob off, or to play a lob, would be that type of ball. We touched on it, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, like the different types of lobs as well. So if we can play that topspin lob, it can be very effective because it's going to be that little bit faster, clear the net player because it's going to drop, and the person at the baseline's got less time to get across, so it's going to struggle more. So with that type of ball, it's going to allow us to get down, rip up the ball fast and play it. Whereas if it's a standard rally ball coming in, like say that's 7 out of 10, it's coming more onto us, so it's harder to play it. So if you're looking to sort of play like a lob as an aggressive sort of sense to gain that advantage, then that's the type of ball that sort of will play it off. Where the lob is obviously up the line we talked about only when we're attacking, we can use the lob in attack, rally and defending sense. We'd probably not necessarily defend and try and lob them as in behind them as much, you might be lobbing them going a little bit more cross court. But if we're sort of defending and we're struggling, like lifting the ball and clearing the net player to keep it safe is actually sort of a good tactic. Because if you're trying to hit cross court and it's just that little bit too weak, it's gone slower, the net player can pounce on it as it's sort of coming through. We see it in sort of club level doubles. You almost see that rally exchange where it lobs over the person and another lob over the other net player, and then as it's sort of coming through. So the actual lob, yes, you're getting them moving around, but they're not. The baseline is not particularly under too much time pressure to get there. They can set up and still play their next shot, compared to like the topspin one, which just will create a lot more challenge level for the person sort of coming in. For you, Roops, anything that you want to add around the lob?
No, I think Andy hit some really good points there. So first of all, you're taking them out of position. You know, you're putting one player behind the other, and they should communicate. But as you probably know, you might know from experience, a lot of players don't communicate well. So you end up with both players on the same side of the court after they've hit the shot back. But also, it can be as simple as if you're rallying on the deuce side, on the right-hand side, you're playing a right-handed player who's got a very strong forehand, but they perhaps have got quite a weak backhand. By lobbing the partner at the net, you're obviously then making them run out of position, but also they're going to have to hit a backhand. And if your lob is good enough, they're going to have to hit a backhand on the run. And then think about recovering back, or think about communicating. Suddenly you give that player 5 or 6 different things to do in a very short space of time, rather than just go, oh, it's another forehand, I'll hit this. Do you know what I mean? So it means you can change the dynamic of the rally quite quickly, but also you can make it very difficult for the other player and sort of play on their weakness. But yeah, I guess the other time I use a lob a lot is when if maybe you're playing slightly better players and you've got a player who likes to approach the net a lot. So you've got the player at the baseline, which Ben and I would both encourage, either serve volleying, or maybe they're hitting the return and coming to the net, or maybe later in the rally they're coming to the net. When that player's on their way in, sometimes if I'll see the player coming in, that's when I'll try and hit the other players already at the net. If you can lob them, it's very difficult for one of them to then go back. It's my connection cutting out. I'm seeing some
you can see it smiling. So just I picked up a few points from Rupert there, a few words so I can decipher again. So what you're sort of saying is like in a doubles context where you've got the baseline approaching the net, whether that be off a serve or they've had a short attacking shot and they're sort of coming in behind it, that would then sort of be a good time sort of lob as well when you've got both at the net. So that's the other sort of variation that you can have. And again, it's the dynamics of where people are and what's sort of happening in the point. I just thought I'd just build on this one. I had Jill's question today, and it's sort of about to do, when do you swap when you're at the net and everything else like that. So obviously the lob is the scenario where we get like the switch play that sort of comes in. So to start with, so a couple of sort of like key things that I sort of have with it is one, it should be majority the decision of the baseliner. But if you're playing with someone that hasn't played much before, you're at the net, you're the experienced player, yes, you can help them through. But if it was equal sort of standings, generally the baseline is the one dictating and calling. So the rule I have is if it's got lobbed over the person at the net and the baseliner can get across, hit it, and recover in time back to the inside tram lines where they want to be, you stay as you are. If it's a lob and the person at the baseline can hit it and they don't have time to get all the way back, that's the point to switch. Because it's sort of, if you're sort of switching when you don't need to, then sometimes there'll be a bit of confusion, space created for our opponents. But if we can get back and the person, so if the lob went over my partner's head, I ran, got there, hit it back to the person at the baseline and got back, it's kind of like reset the point back to sort of rally situation. So that's kind of like the overview of when to switch to start with. And again, the person at the baseline ideally has a nice clear call to help their partner switch or stay. But I said, if you're the net player and they're not as experienced as you, it's absolutely fine to sort of help them out. So like obviously when I'm playing with people that haven't played much before, I'll be sort of telling them where to go and sort of where to stand. And sometimes in that little bit of a grey area where like you could or you couldn't, and the baseline is not really coming to a decision, then what I'd actually do is actually show with my body language what's sort of going on. So if I was at the net on this side, it's gone over me this way, my partner's coming across, and I think they should be able to get back. I move to the side so they can what that does is they can see the whole court with their shot, and also as well they know that I'm staying here, so they have to get back. Whereas if I feel it's going far enough across and they're not going to be able to get back, then you sort of move early to create, again, the space for them to hit into as it's coming. What you want to try and avoid is that sort of where are we going, what are we doing, and then quite often like the ball's behind the person here, then they'll move just before the person hits it, and then they move where they're hitting the ball, and that's where you see some sort of quite comical points from our perspective, where poor people are getting, as long as no one gets hurt, of course, some comical sort of ones where people are getting like peppered with the ball as they sort of move across. But again, if we covered it with clear communication, or clear body language in terms of what you want as the net player, what you're helping them to do, that's going to help. Second thing, I think, just to elaborate on the question just for Jill as well, where does the net player go when the switch happens? So when we sort of switch, you don't go, if you've got our neutral position for like doubles to start with, you don't just go to the other side's neutral position facing the other person. What actually happens if this was like the service box, like the width of this, normally we're kind of like more in the middle as we're sort of in the service box with the other service box here. When we've switched from this side to this side, we actually stay closer to the center.
Right.
Because what you have is two people hitting up the line to each other. You're then sort of cutting off the angle behind you. Whereas when you see people go all the way across, there's just this huge gap created that the baseliner can just hit into and take full advantage with. The other thing as well is like if I've been lobbed and my partner's under pressure, essentially as a pair we're defending. So what I do is, again, so I move across, but I also move back towards like the service line, so around this sort of area on the service box. So what this is doing is two things. One, I'm covering the angle from the person hitting from the baseline, but two, I've got more time to react if it goes to the net player. So I'm sort of hedging bets by moving back. If my partner hits a reasonably good shot, what I do is then move up and forwards to keep this area of the service box, obviously not going back to this position, which is a common mistake as it sort of comes through. A little bit hard, obviously, demonstrating with a racket rather than the pictures, but we don't want to use any pictures from a YouTube video. Jill, does that help you with your...
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Does anyone want any more elaboration around the sort of the switch and everything else?
I mean, you'd still be staying within that service box, wouldn't you? You wouldn't be going further back towards the service line at any stage if you're the net player.
So we've got different scenarios. So let's say I went from this side, I've switched, I'm kind of back here initially. Now, when we sort of play doubles, do we watch our partner or do we watch the opponents when the ball's behind us? Which one?
Opponent.
Your opponent.
Yeah, I've drilled that into people.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm watching the opponents and I see the other person opposite me, like setting up for a nice easy smash because my partner's been under pressure, I would have been like the back of the service box, but I would then be scurrying back towards the baseline to again give me more time to have react to it. But if I'm here and I see it go cross court, so it'll be then up the line to the other person, then I would then be moving back to like my neutral distance away from the net, obviously a little bit more central. And then still, like if my partner then hit a really strong shot to the person at the baseline, I'd then move up closer to the net because it's then in that attacking position. But it's just getting used to sort of being that slightly position at the net. I mean, you guys have seen me probably do drills a fair few times with that one, but even to be honest, even in some of our team sort of level, like people don't do this particularly well, and it makes such a big difference just being in the right place. Such a big difference. Roops, anything to elaborate or build on?
No, I think the main thing you've just touched on it really, Jill's question. But the main thing is when you're, I'm trying to think of the situation when your partner's been lobbed and they're going back for that ball. as the net player, yeah, you go across, obviously, but you move back anticipating that the player opposite is probably going to get a smash. There's a very high chance the ball's going to be, smashed back. So you want to be in a position not only where you're on the other side of your court, your opponent, covering both sides, but actually in a position where you've got time to defend against the ball coming to you. So yeah, you don't just want to go across and stay, a metre away from the net because you're no use there. So it's just reading the pressure, and like we spoke about before, that's always changing in a point. In a rally, that's changing from shot to shot. And we touched on it a few weeks ago and just said that's why the movement and the positioning is so important. Because if it can change with one shot, one good lob or one good lob returned, and suddenly you need to be somewhere completely different to where you did, less than a second ago. So it's just really understanding what the ball's doing and what the opponents are doing.
You think as well, a lot of what we've talked about is when we're making a decision of changing from 101 tennis, one of the big factors has always been where's our opponent.
Yeah. So
where our opponent is actually having a big effect on our decisions and what our risk reward ratios is for shots. So for our perspective, if we're standing in the wrong place, we're just giving them a better reward without their skill set changing. But on our side, it's like if we're able to recognise people's positions, we can then choose why we are doing something different because the reward is more there as we're playing. I mean, you can do. Me and Roops were sort of discussing some sort of stories earlier. We can, you can do the right things. There was we'll come back to the doubles match that Rupert said I hit round the net post for a winner. I'll add it landed it was out pretty much the whole way until it landed just inside the baseline. It was a gorgeous shot, but the person we were playing against was a lad called Josh Sapwell, who, I don't know if you guys ever heard of the tournament, the Orange Bowl, which is a junior tennis tournament, which essentially sits at the same level as junior Grand Slams. It's like one of the most prestigious junior events in the world. The guy we were playing won that as a 14-year-old lad. So it was, I think at the time made him the official junior #1 of the world. This was the player we were playing against that day. You can imagine he was quite useful. So Rupert, we're discussing sort of like tactics and how we're talking about the importance of serving down the tee rather than out wide. So like Rupert was like, can I serve out wide this time? No, Rupert, go down the tee. It's the safe tactic to go. Rupert sends down the serve, probably as good as you could hit, right down. You could, it's obviously you're looking forward. You hear the sound, it's sweet straight away. It flies past you into the tee and the service box. You couldn't ask for a better setup from Rupert. Now, so in this situation, as the net player, we know that they should be defending. So we're moving forwards. It's down the centre. We move into this way. We've also learned from what we've said, the risk of going up the line is, very high risk. It's not the thing to do. So this guy, out of full stretch with about this much movement with his racket, sent the ball back faster than Rupert's serve, flying past my tram into my tram lines, and I didn't even have the reaction speed to do that, to even move my racket to it. It was an absolute rocket. Rupert was just looking at me going, I've never seen that in my life. That's so yeah. I mean, you can imagine it. We had a tough task that day against an ex-junior world #1. What we surprised ourselves with is we actually got to a tie-break, which we were very pleased with.
This isn't relevant though, because this isn't actually anything to do with what we're doing today.
No, it's not.
Who was he playing with? Was he just playing by himself? No.
No, it's not. Yeah, he could have done.
We didn't tell you. Brilliant, Mark.
Yeah, he was playing with his child. Yeah, so we got to set point on my serve. So I backed myself with my serve. Send down, got the first serve in. Very happy. Went to the guy's backhand because his backhand on the ad side. So the backhand was weaker. Tactically, it was the right move to go with. He stretches. He opens the racket face. Pops up a smash to Rupert. It was a step. It was just one step in. It was set up, ready to win the set against the ex-junior world number 1. Rupert, do you want to finish off the story?
Have you slept since? I mean, you sound like you're losing sleep over it. This is like 2 years ago.
It was. It still hurts. Can you tell the guys what happened next, Rupert?
I've got no regrets. It's unprofessional. So I'm not, no comment. I missed the smash, all right? So I missed the smash, turned around, Ben was on his knees, hand in head, or head in hand.
Okay, just to elaborate a little bit, missing the smash, not just, a slight miss hit or something like that. It was caught one.
It hit the side
one at Elliswick. He hit the side fence.
At the very top of the side fence.
Top of the side fence with a gimme smash on set point against an ex-junior world number 1.
I saw Federer miss a forehand earlier.
Oh.
Very easy forehand.
I was gutted. So essentially, you can do everything right, guys, but if your partner lets you down, he lets you down. Well, on the second point, I was slightly at fault on the first one, but it was not a bad bit of world-class returning that absolutely nailed me.
Ben, have you considered having counselling for this particular?
Good to say, Andy. You can tell it really affects him.
I mean, in my head, Andy, it was already written up on the CV. Still got it. Beaten an ex-junior. Well, no, and gone taken from me. Should have gone for the ace rather than the simple setup on the serve. It was. I've got to take blame on it.
Unbelievable.
Oh dear, it was good fun though. It was good fun. So yeah, obviously we sort of covered a few things. Sort of like we obviously got like the basic 101, and then like how to change it up, and like the key thing for it, guys, obviously understanding the whys when to sort of change it. Was there any other particular scenario that you wanted to cover today, Rupert?
Not really. I think that's everything. The only other thing I had was sort of communication between server and net player. So, just sort of communicating before you hit the serve. It's something that you guys probably have seen maybe when if you've sort of walked past and you've seen people playing team tennis. To be honest, maybe our ladies' first team, I think there's players in there that would do it. Even our men's first team. I mean, I'm guilty of doing service games where I don't communicate to my partner where I'm serving. Bad practice again on my part. But you will have seen it sometimes. You definitely see it if you've watched professional doubles, and it's something that we can all do. And it really just comes back to the point that if you are serving, you're meant to have the advantage. It's a good idea if you let your partner know at least where you're planning on serving the ball. Otherwise, the returner actually knows where that ball goes before your partner does, if you think of it that way, because obviously your partner can't see you hit the serve. So you're actually giving more information to the opponents before you're giving that information to your partner, so it doesn't really make any sense. So just the basics really of just letting your partner know where you're going to serve. That can have a big impact. Sort of psychologically, it can give them a lot more confidence at the net. At least if you said, look, I'm going to serve out wide this time. Obviously, if you're playing with Ben against Josh, he'll tell you, no, don't do that. Serve down the tee instead. But if you, at least if you have a plan in place, it gives them a bit more confidence, even if the serve doesn't go there. At least, most of them will, but at least it gives them some information to go on. Not really. I think we covered most things. I think we covered most things. It was more the movement, when to go down the line. Yeah, I think unless anyone's got any questions, there were some really good questions actually, and hopefully everything we said was clear and concise. Is there anything else anyone wants to speak about or ask?
I know Jill likes to test us to make sure we actually generally know it and we don't have time to prep about sort of 7:20, sort of like.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Just the thought occurs in my mind. That's all.
Cover this. I mean, luckily we know the subject fairly well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely, no doubt.
Yeah. Wow.
You were going to cover, I don't know whether it was a joke or not, but like the general psychology of tennis and how you sort of keep because it's a psychological game, isn't it? And it can be won or lost on a mindset.
That is one that I wanted to do. So I know I did say that, and that was a genuine sort of one, Jill.
Oh.
Yeah, so
I
that'll be
might
next
give-
week for the week
I might give that week a miss, or I might come in as a student. I sit there quietly taking notes while looking at my pile of broken tennis rackets.
It's one that I certainly need to prep a little bit more for, but yeah, that's one that I want to do. So yeah, that will be
We've got
next
2
week
weeks.
or the week after.
Okay.
Cool. Yes, unless there's anything else, guys, we're looking forward to seeing you again next week. Always enjoy our Wednesday nights and seeing friendly faces. We've got Gillian back as well now, another friendly face back on the screen. Anyway, so yeah, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So,
Super.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Bye.
See you next week.
Thanks,
Right,
guys.
thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.